Students, today we are going to start the next lesson, The Address, written by Marga Menko of your book Snapshots. Before going to see the story, let's see a bit about the author. Marga Menko is a pseudonym for Sarah Menko. Pseudonym means false name. Actually, the author's real name is Sarah Menko, but she has written her write ups, that is, stories and articles, etc., by the name of Marga Menko. She was born on 31st March 1920 in southwest Netherlands. Marga Menko is Dutch journalist and writer, and her actual surname was Menko, Menco, but by mistake it was written as Minco, and so she got the name Margot Menko. As a young girl, Marga, along with her Jewish parents, moved to Brede, a town near her birthplace. And as a child, she hated her Jewish identity, never liked the Jews, and often wished that she was like other non Jewish children. In 1938, Marga Menko began work at the local newspaper as a film reporter, but later she joined the editorial desk. But as she was Jewish and at the time Jew, she and it was the time of Second World War, she was dismissed from her post and she went to Amsterdam, where she became a drawing teacher as a Jewish elementary school. And later in the war, Minko's parents, her brother, and her sister, they were deported, but Sarah escaped arrest. She hid herself somewhere and she spent the time when the war was on hiding at one place. She was the only survivor of her family. She also received a new name, Marga Fess, and the first part of which she continued to use. During the early 1950s, she published short stories in various magazines and newspapers. Minko, she was inspired by her experiences during the war, and her first short novel, Hutch Bitter Crude, and you see bitter herbs in English as it is a name. It is a painful story of a young girl during World War II, and it sold 400,000 copies in the Netherlands alone, and the novel was translated into several languages, and Marga Minko, she was awarded the Viverberg Prize in 1958. So this story you are going to read, The Address, which she wrote, it is also related to a Jewish family. Here in this story, we will find a girl and her mother who are Jews. And in this story, you will find four characters. First one, the daughter, that is the narrator, who returns to Holland to go to the address where her mother's precious belongings were kept. And as the second one, what we will find, this girl's mother, and you in the story you will find the mother as Mrs. S. So the narrator's mother in the story, the she is called as Mrs. S. She was very simple lady, and anybody could manipulate her. So we will find in the story how she was manipulated by her friend. Third character we will find Mrs. Darling, another lady, and fourth one, this is Mrs. Darling's daughter. So these four characters you will find in this story. So let's see in brief what the story you are going to go to read. This story is a touching account of a girl, as I told you, the narrator, who goes in search of her mother's belongings after the Second World War in Holland. Okay, and let's see what happens as she goes. So, this is a story about loss and regret experienced by the Dutch Jews who were inhumanly persecuted by the Nazis during the Second World War. So, when this young narrator, that is, this young Dutch Jew girl, she knocks the door of the apartment as the story begins. This address of the apartment was given to her by her mother. And when she knocks the door, what we see? A middle aged woman. She answers her knock, means she opens the door. And she is just not ready to talk to the girl. She doesn't want to talk to the girl and rudely tells the narrator that is, she has no time. Why? We will find in the story why this all happens. Initially, this narrator thought, she doubted that she had knocked at a wrong address. But clearly, this thought it was dispelled when she finds the woman wearing the green knitted cardigan that belonged to her mother. So that green knitted cardigan, which was her mother, when she saw her being worn by that lady, she just was clear that she had knocked at the right address. She was not at the wrong address. And reluctantly, she leaves and walks towards the station. So, when the lady refused to talk to her, she hesitatingly, reluctantly leaves the gate and walks towards the station to go back to her home. And remembering what her mother had told her about Mrs. Darling. So, see, this is Mrs. Darling, the lady who had shut the door, who didn't want to talk to the narrator. So, she recalls about this name, Mrs. Darling, that had been told to her by her mother when she was taking away their nice things like silver cutlery, antique plates, and vases for safety because she was not a Jew. So, as I have told you, the part has been taken from the Second World War when Jews were being killed. So, that time, this lady, Mrs. Darling, who was not a Jew, has taken very expensive antique things from this narrator's mother, just saying that she would keep them safe and as the war gets over, she would return that. So, this all is being remembered by the narrator. So, what we find when she is not entertained by the lady, she goes back to the station thinking about the past. She remembers her mother telling her Mrs. Darling's address and asking her to commit it to her memory. So, unable to get their belongings out of her mind, she visits Mrs. Darling's house again. This time she is let in by the daughter. So, first time when she goes, she is not entertained by the lady. She goes back, but she is unable to forget the memories. She is unable to forget the memory of her past, her mother, the belongings, whatever they had in their house. She goes again to that house, to Mrs. Darling's house. And this time she is let in by the daughter. So, this time when she reaches there, Mrs. Darling is not at home. She is attended by her daughter, and her daughter welcomes her and takes her in. And you will find in the story the address is also very important, that she finds 46 and she remembers that address which was given by her mother. And rest of the story, that you will read, this is a moving account of how the familiar objects evoke memories of the past and narrator's eventual decision to forget the address. Actually, when she is taken in by the girl in the house, she looks at the things which were placed in Mrs. Darling's house, but they all belonged to her. Actually, these all things had been taken by Mrs. Darling from narrator's mothers. But as the things had lost their value, they were placed in very unfamiliar surroundings. They were not maintained properly. They had lost their importance because of not taken care of them. So, this narrator, what she does, she decides to go back. What she is doing? So, she wants to leave the things there. She doesn't want to take them with her, and according to her, they had lost their value. So the narrator walked out of Mrs. Darling's house, deciding that she would never come back to the house to see or take away her family's possessions, as she had no place to keep all of it. Actually, she was also living in a very small room, small house, where there was no sufficient place to keep all the things. Actually, she wanted to have a look on that, but she just decided to go back and never to come back again to this address 46 Marconi Street. And she left the house and went back. So, dear students, you have to go through the text that I am sending you in the PDF, and you will find this story very interesting one.